As a business owner, you might be thinking that the biggest threat to your business is low sales, when in fact, it's probably that small expense that's laying right in plain sight. It's reoccurring every month and it's draining cash out of your business. A lot of businesses not only overspend, but when they do spend, they spend on the wrong things. And so in today's video, I'm going to help you break down looking at your expenses and figuring out which ones are going to be adding value and which ones gotta go. I'm James Masadi. I'm the owner of Our Team Accounting, Crystal Clear Property Management, and I'm a real estate investor. And on this channel, I'm passionate about helping business owners achieve their personal and professional goals through intentional financial planning. So let's go ahead and dive right into today's video. All right, the first thing that I want to go ahead and I want to start talking about is the concept of death by 1,000 paper cuts. You've probably heard of this concept before, but in today's business environment, it is so much easier to fall into this trap. There are so many amazing tools and softwares and AIs and machine learning and whatever you want to call it that offer these really cool, fancy gizmo gadgets and widgets that all cost $5, $10, $15, $20, $25 a month. And it's like, oh, hey, I'm going to be able to save so much time and energy on all of these different kinds of things. And you all of a sudden start to not realize the fact that they're adding up and adding up and adding up. And they actually end up becoming a really significant component of your business's expenses. When in reality, because you're so busy actually running your business, you're probably not fully utilizing the vast majority of those tools. And so while they can be great, powerful, amazing resources for you as a business owner, they are so often going underutilized that you'd actually be better off not having those expenses in your business and focusing on just a handful of things that you're actually going to use and leverage inside of your business. So these things could end up being like subscriptions that you're paying for. It could be memberships where you're not fully taking advantage of all of the perks, or you're not attending the events or any of those sorts of things. And that's really like the core set of things that we're thinking about. But you don't want to miss out on things like your legacy subscription providers, right? So you maybe have like tools that you started with, and maybe there's not the right tool to help you grow and scale anymore. And maybe you forgot to cancel a subscription or something along those lines. So that's another area to really take a look at and focus on. Another thing that we see a lot of business owners really kind of take on is what I want to call vanity expenses. And vanity expenses are those things like, really getting like fancy rents for things, upgrading to like the latest and greatest tools and technology because they want to make sure that they look state of the art versus instead focusing on, functionality. And so when you're looking at, or you're thinking about wanting to like spend money on something, or if you've already spent money on something, really want you to think about asking yourself, like, is this actually adding value to me? Or am I just want this so that I feel better about the business that I'm trying to run? Because at the end of the day, if you're not generating ROI from those specific expenses, then here's the thing. Whether they're actually costing you money or not, and let's be transparent, like you're paying for it, so they are. But in addition to that, there's also kind of like just the thought and the overhead that ultimately goes with all of those things. So you might have these subscriptions on autopilot. And so as you're going through, you see these expenses hitting your, bank feeds that you're going to be going through and categorizing those expenses. And so every time you see like that expense come through, you're going to be like, oh, that's right, I have that tool. I need to start using that more, right? And so what you end up doing is actually creating more stress for yourself as a business owner, because you start realizing that like, oh, I have that tool that I'm paying for. I really need to start using that more because it's going to add this much value. And here's the thing that we need to accept, we need to realize. As human beings, we only have 24 hours in the day. And hopefully you're spending a decent chunk of those sleeping, spending time with your friends and family, and other things beyond just grinding all day long to work, right? But even if you are, there's a pretty good chance, especially if you're in your early stages of your business, that you're actually doing a significant amount of the work, whether that's you're out on sales calls, doing marketing, doing networking, doing the work. All of those sort of things are taking up a lot of your time, and you don't always have the time you need to, as we kind of call, step back and work on your business instead of in your business. And when you just have these extra expenses putting the burden on you instead of being able to focus on like, hey, these are the couple of things that we're going to do well, we're going to execute on really, really good. And then when we get to that next level, then we'll talk about bringing in this next tool, this next technology, and this next thing that's going to help us get to the next level. One of the big things that's going to be able to really help with that is utilizing the profit first methodology, which we talked about in our last video. When we start to look at profit first, we're going to make sure that we are prioritizing the amount of money that we are setting aside for our profit, for our owner's compensation, and that we are planning to pay taxes for a profitable business. When we do all of that, there's only so much money left over that we can utilize to spend on our expenses. And when we have that smaller bucket than what we historically have looked at, then we really start to think about looking at things from a different lens, because we're not looking at it as a $20 expense on a really big number. We're looking at it as a $20 expense on a much smaller number. All right, so now that we've kind of had this conversation about needing to figure out what expenses we need to be cutting, I'm going to actually walk you through a process that you can do inside of your QuickBooks to actually find and identify these expenses so that you know how to find them and how you can go about trying to figure them out. So I've got pulled up here our Craig's Design and Landscape Services. This is the demo company account that exists inside of QuickBooks. So it might look a little bit different than your QuickBooks, but hopefully it's going to be able to help you kind of run through everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to reports, and we're going to go to our standard reports. And then from our standard reports, you can either scroll down until you find the vendor section, or you can type in the search here. I already have been running this, but the report that we're looking for is this one right here, this expenses by vendor summary. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then my recommendation is I run this kind of for a little bit of a longer period of time, because like some software expenses, like you maybe only pay once a year or once a quarter, every month, things along those lines. So just because you want to make sure you like grab a full thing, I like to kind of grab a little bit more than a year. So just because we're in April of 2025 right now, I'm going to change this date to January 2024 to now. It grabs enough time frame. Then I'm going to go ahead and run this by month. I'm going to go ahead and run it by cash basis, simply because most businesses operate on a cash basis. So I know we'll have good data this way, and then go ahead and run. So again, this is a dummy account. So you can kind of see they don't keep a ton of historical data in this when QuickBooks like republishes all the data and stuff along those lines. But if this were your business, obviously, depending on how old it is, you would see all of your suppliers that are being listed. You would have it broken out by month and what expenses you have. And we can even see right on here that there's some of these expenses that are happening, not every month, some started sooner, some later, all of that sort of stuff. And that's, not all that indifferent from what we would normally see in a regular business. So when you run this report, then you're going to come up here and you're going to click on this little symbol, and we're going to go export to Excel. When you do that, it's going to run the download, and I have that file right here that I'm going to pull over. And so when you get this down into your Excel, then what we're going to go ahead and do is I recommend first, kind of highlighting across where the months are. And then we're going to go under data, and we're going to apply a filter. And then from this filter, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to filter, and I'm going to say sort this from largest to smallest. Now, your total is going to get messed up because of the way the formulas get calculated. Don't worry about that. It doesn't really matter for the purpose of this. But this is now going to give us like for this entire time horizon, right? So for me, this is like 15 and a half months-ish. Basically the total amount that we've spent across all of these different vendors. So this is the first way to kind of really get a sense for like, all right, what vendors am I spending the most amount of money with? And we want to start at the top of this list and work our way down to see like, okay, are these people adding value? Are they contributing? What am I using them for? Is there opportunity to purge these sort of things? And you want to be able to look at it, right, like on that total basis. However, what I also recommend that you do is you kind of repeat that same exercise by month. So the reason we kind of applied those filters across the top, right, is I'm going to go into April, and I'm going to say largest to smallest, and I'm going to see, okay, like here's where it is for the month, right? Then by March, I'm going to do that same kind of thing. So this gives you a little bit of a perspective of like, hey, maybe I've already cut some of those expenses, right? Like, so maybe like when I sort it largest to smallest, those are like older legacy expenses I've already cut out. So they're still going to show up on the list, and that's going to help reaffirm like, oh, hey, I did the right thing. I actually got rid of these expenses, right? But then when you go month by month, especially starting in the more recent months and then working your way backwards, that's going to help you find like, oh, I added this new expense, or this new thing cropped up. And so maybe because it's new, it's not on the top of the list for this longer 15 and a half month time horizon we've pulled. But it might only be $200 or $300 a month, but maybe $200 or $300 a month isn't a lot when you compare it to everything else. But if you try to project that forward, it might become one of your biggest expenses, in the next 12 months if you didn't actually kind of control that, right? So that's why I kind of recommend to people like doing this both ways and kind of working through all of your expenses again to kind of figure out, where do you have that duplication, right? Where do you have all that sort of stuff? And then as you're going through that particular exercise, right, you want to kind of like, set up, some columns off to the side here. And I recommend, like just being able to like, so you can like make notes. So like, what is it for? Like what's it doing for you, right? Then we also want to take a look at, like what problem is this solving, right? Like if it's not helping you do something, right? Like because it's a supplier and you're getting something from them, if it's not a software that you're actively using it, right? So then you're going to say like, am I actively using this, right? So that's just that kind of piece of like, it might be a great tool and maybe it can help you, but if you're not using it every single month, right, then there's a pretty good chance that like you can eliminate this expense and not see a significant reduction in the performance of your business, but you'll have more. The thing with cutting expenses, right, is that they drop directly to the bottom line, right? To raise revenue, like to offset the same drop to your expenses, like you have to absorb everything that's in your gross margin, right? So like, for every dollar in expenses you cut, you might have to actually, get $1.50 or $2 in revenue in order to offset that. So, if we can even do a little bit of trimming and cutting here, there's some huge opportunities to benefit the bottom line. So, and then the last thing that we're going to talk about or document on here is what's the ROI? And so this is, you don't necessarily need to have like a way of tracking your ROI on every single one of these things in the sense of like, oh, if it's a supplier, I know I mark up my expenses 5% or something along those lines, 10%, right? And so you might be able to say like, oh, my ROI is 10% on this because I know it's a supplier, and when I do pass through built in, I'm marking things up 10%, right? That could be one way, but if it's like we've got this tool or we've got this software, this automation, one of the ways that you could be calculating, the ROI is simply on time saved, right? So if I was doing this manually, or if I had to hire somebody to do that, what would it cost me in order to, have that particular expense? And so that's another way to kind of contemplate ROI. I do recommend actually putting these titles in place first. I should have probably talked about that. And then apply your filter, again, including those so that as you're labeling these, as you sort and filter what you fill in here, like it follows the line. If you don't do that, it will sort and filter and move them around differently. So my apologies for not telling you to do that up front, but we're going to create these 4 columns, right? And then we're going to go through it. And as you do that, you're going to answer these questions for each one of those expenses to really, again, reflect on what is the influence, what is the impact these things are having on my business. If you cannot point to solid information that is going to lead you to a clear understanding of how that's adding value to your business, then I strongly encourage you, eliminate the expense. So again, it might be whether if it's something that you paid for on an annualized basis, just go ahead and cancel it now. You'll have it until whenever your annual subscription is going to renew. And it won't auto renew. So you always have the ability of like, if you actually set it as a priority to start using it, you can go back and start doing that. But today I want you to go ahead and cancel it. Like give yourself that timer. That's like, if I don't actively go and redo this, then it's going to expire. But here's the thing, even if it does expire and you completely miss and you go to log in one day and it's like, oh, your account's no longer active. One, most companies are going to send you a reminder, but also two, like it's not like your data gets deleted. Most of these cloud tools and systems and all that sort of stuff, just because you cancel your account, your data doesn't get deleted. So if a year down the road comes by, you all of a sudden realize like, oh, hey, I did start using that tool. I need to react. Then just turn your account back on. Most of these like software subscriptions and tools, it's not like you're grandfathered into some sort of special discounted pricing. Now, if you are, maybe give this a little bit of extra thought, but don't think too hard about it to be like, oh, if I cancel the current market price on this is $5 a month more, $10 a month more, or something along those lines. Well, here's the thing. If you're paying for it the entire time and you're not using it, well, like you'd better off be canceling it and then like paying $5 or $10 a month more when you're actually going to use it, because now you'll have a positive ROI rather than right now it's a negative drain on your business. And so when you look at the gap, it's not a $5 or $10 difference. It's actually a $40, $50, $100 difference, because we're talking about a tool that you're paying $20 for and using that to generate $80 in revenue or in cost savings, compared to a tool that you're paying $12 a month for right now and doing absolutely nothing with. So again, like I want you to think about it from that kind of perspective when you're analyzing all of these sort of things. This is a very kind of like quick, like easy process to kind of go through based on spending. There is a more complex process that we run through. I call it the cash accumulation budgeting tool that we have available for free in our free school community. So if you're interested in diving deeper into, how to kind of go about looking at this and what percentage everything is and all of that sort of stuff, then I recommend checking out our free school community. There should be a link down in the description for that, and going in there and checking out that particular tool and how to utilize that. All right, so now that we're done kind of doing that download and looking at your, our expenses and what we're going to be able to cut and all of that sort of stuff, some other things that you want to be able to utilize this tool for, and for this, you might actually want to go and run the report, maybe even for a little bit longer period of time, depending on how long you've obviously been in business, is start looking for like areas where like your costs have been going up. And this isn't necessarily to make sure that like you're cutting costs, as much as it is to make sure that you are accurately reflecting the increase in your costs in your pricing to your customers. So this is another area where a lot of business owners also start to get tripped up, is they may have these actual legitimate business expenses that they need to have, but what they don't do a great job of keeping up with raising their costs. So you might have had, better margins, maybe a year, 2, 3 years ago. And because you've only been raising your prices maybe 2, 3, 5%, when your cost basis has maybe gone up 4, 5, 6%, you're going to start feeling a lot more squeezed now than you did back in the day, because you didn't keep up with the cost of inflation. This is certainly happening a lot more in, call it, the last 5 years in a post-COVID environment, because we've seen significant wage increases. As we sit here in April 2025, there's starting to be discussions of like tariff impact. And so if you have materials or anything in your business that may be impacted by tariffs, you could easily be seeing a 8 to 20, 30, 40% increase in your materials that you should be proactively planning to pass those costs along to your supplier and to your customers, not necessarily waiting for your suppliers to come and communicate that those are happening. Is already start, maybe not saying like, okay, if you're anticipating a 20% material increase, obviously you don't need to increase your prices 20%. You might only need to increase your price, 2% in order to offset that 20% material increase. So do a little bit of the math to understand like what it is that you actually need to do. And if it hasn't even come through yet, maybe even just start with like a 1% price adjustment, so that you're not like smacking people with like big, massive price changes all at once. You're able to kind of step change them as you get closer to those things. And so the biggest problem really is in this not paying attention, right? It's in this element of, not going through. So I really recommend that, whether you're doing this quarterly, twice a year, whatever it is, make sure that you schedule some time. If you're doing this on a regular, frequent basis, it really shouldn't take you that long to go through this particular exercise. The first pass through, if you have never done this before, might take you some time, but again, the biggest thing that you're going to be able to do, the most beneficial thing that you're going to be able to do for your business, is make sure that you've trimmed as much fat as you can, because as a small business owner, you don't have the free cash to just let these things continue to pile up. And so now that we've really focused on trying to, take a look at our expenses and get that tightened up as much as we possibly can, we really want to start focusing now on, all of those key financial metrics that are really going to be able to help us grow our business in a meaningful way that is going to allow us to achieve our individual business goals. So I want you to go ahead and click on the next video right here on your screen, where we're going to dive deeper into setting up dashboards and KPIs that you can use to measure your business's success in the long term. I'll see you there.